It all started in my old forge in Ventura, California in the early 60s. It was a crude little shop, but we were making the world's best climbing equipment. You know, we were making stuff for ourselves, number one, and we happened to be on the kind of the cutting edge of climbing at the time. None of us wanted to be businessmen, that's for sure. Had to do something, just to support our climbing habits and surfing habits. I hired kind of dirtbag friends who were climbers and surfers and stuff, and every time the surf come up, we'd all abandon the shop and go surfing. One day in 1968, my friend Doug Tompkins said, "Hey, let's go down to Patagonia and go climb Mount Fitzroy," and picked up a 16mm Bolex camera to record the trip. Loaded the car up with surfboards and climbing gear and took off for a 10,000-mile trip down south. I think from the time we decided to go was like 2 weeks before we went. We bought this old van and took off from Ventura. 1968, you got to remember the Pan American Highway was pretty wild. It was dirt road from Mexico City all the way south. It was like being in Montana or Wyoming 100 years ago. Here we're in an area that's the size of the whole American West, with no people.
For those of us that grew up going out into the wilds of the world, where nature was basically untouched, we got into our souls a sense of beauty.
That trip had a big influence on both Doug and I. It kind of set the course for what we were going to do later in life. For me, it was the best trip of my life.
Here's to now. Here's to now.
10 years ago, I found that old footage of Doug and Yvon's trip to Patagonia back in 1968. It was like seeing everything I'd ever wanted to do in my life. From that point on, I promised myself that someday I'd find a way to do a trip like theirs. Years went by before I finally got my chance. I heard about a boat dock down in Mexico that was headed for Patagonia. They needed crew, and I needed a ride south. My name is Jeff Johnson. Look in any phone book and you'll find 10 of me. I grew up in Danville, California. You probably never heard of it, but it's a long way from the ocean and the mountains. When I was 8 years old, two things set me on the path that I'm still on. The first one was when my parents took me on a camping trip to Yosemite Valley. I remember looking through a telescope up at this huge granite wall and guys climbing thousands of feet up. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was like watching men walk on the moon. And that same year I saw surfing for the first time on TV, Wide World of Sports. I saw these guys riding massive walls of water. There were people out there putting themselves in places they weren't supposed to be. And I knew right then that I wanted to be there too.
Actually was thinking, said everything out loud, 'cause apricot seeds carry arsenal that we don't worry about. Sitting on your doorstep waiting for you to come home or come out. Well, apple seeds have cyanide that we don't care about. So here's to now. Here's to now.
Most of my life, I've figured out ways to pick up and leave as the seasons change. I've been a dishwasher, a lifeguard, a flight attendant, whatever it took to pay for the next trip. In the last couple years, though, I've found a real job. I've started planning some routes. I've spent a lot less time on the road. But I never forgot about my dream of seeing Patagonia with my own eyes. Sure, I could take my 2 weeks vacation time and just fly down to Patagonia. But I'll never get a chance like this one again. If I don't get on that boat, I know exactly what I'm going home to. If I do, my future is unwritten. I'm drawn to open country. It's where everything becomes clear, where the world makes the most sense. When I put myself out there, I always return with something new. A friend once told me, the best journeys answer questions that in the beginning you didn't even think to ask. I met Yvon for the first time in the South Pacific a few years ago. I told him about finding that old footage of his and wanting to get to Patagonia myself.
Jeff is the real thing. He's just total dirtbag. He can live out of his car, climbing in the valley. He's become a really good climber. Rides any kind of waves. He's just kind of hustling his way along so he can stay on the road. He reminded me a lot about how I used to be. I met a lot of young people who asked me what books to read or films to watch. I think it's a good way to start, but there's no substitute for just going there.